Start recording.
Yeah. So once again, I formally welcome each of the panelists. And then it's a warm welcome from Powai Bengali Welfare Association. And this is an event that we conduct during Durgotsav so that we can reach out to more people, those who come for celebration. And along with celebrations, we can have some kind of a serious discussion so that that is a takeaway from the celebration. So here we have Sukanti, and who will be Sukanti Ghosh. He is joining us from US. He is our moderator. He is from ASG, Albright Stonebridge Group. He is leading the practice, South Asia practice, and he is widely acclaimed, and he has been hugely successful in various engaging with various governments and then civil societies in the Southeast Asia and across the globe. So having said this, I'll just pass this baton to Sukanti Ghosh, Mr. Sukanti Ghosh, who will be taking this discussion forward with our esteemed panelists today. Over to Sukanti.
Thank you, Sarvir. Gentlemen, good morning, good evening. So the sustainability continuum is what we're here to talk about today. And sustainability, as most of you know, is perhaps, one of the most common themes you hear in discussions in universities, in boardrooms, in our own living rooms, almost every day today. But if you really think about it, sustainability, while people talk about it, it isn't only a single word. There isn't a very clear definition of what sustainability is all about, because it really means different things to different people, which start, as foundational as access to food and water, but go through, a series of complex ideas, mazes, concepts, which is almost like a continuum, which would stretch through, extended producer responsibility, talk about and much about. So over the next hour, what I'd really like to do is to spend time with all of you and to try and delve into some of these concepts. And towards the end of the discussion, I'd really like to circle back and seek your views in terms of, so what does this mean for all of us? As individuals, as people, as families, what does this really mean for all of us? So we would definitely, as Powai Bengali Welfare Association, as a social welfare organization, we'd appreciate your thoughts, we'd appreciate your counsel, and most of all, we appreciate you being here with us today. I start our discussions with Anjan. I'm going to turn to him. Anjan Mukherjee is founder and chief executive of a fascinating company called Taraltec. And I'm going to ask him questions straight up. Anjan, what does sustainability mean to you?
I have a very simple answer for that. I don't know how correct it is or whatever. Whatever you find in the world, if you can improve on it without harming anybody, I think that is sustainability. And that's what I believe in. And if you've harmed even any part of whatever you're touching, then it is not sustainable.
Interesting. Again, through my discussions with you, I've heard you talk about the fact that you started your life as a marine engineer. You've traveled the world. You've held various positions. What spurred you to turn entrepreneur, and where did this idea of Taraltec come from?
Before I became a marine engineer, let me add a few things which will probably make it slightly more exciting. I'm a Powaiker for now close to 60 years, 60. So I was also a student of IIT Bombay for 2 years, and I quit midways. At that time, it was dropping out was really looked upon as, you're good for nothing. Anyway, I became a marine engineer. and I was sailing almost continuously, and I had a lot of leave due on me. So for a lark, I appeared for the CAT for the IIMs. I bizarrely enough got through, and then started the normal corporate this thing. I was with ITC at various companies. At one point, I was a management consultant. I did whatever came my way. And then one fine day, I realized that what I'm doing in this management space is all nonsense. And I love engineering. So I started studying engineering afresh. And one thing led to the other. And there was a very interesting marine related problem, which is on a ship. When a ship goes from one place to the other without cargo, you have to take in water. And before you can load the cargo, you have to discharge this water. Unfortunately, this water from the first place has got microorganisms which by law you cannot discharge at an alien place, because that kills the local ecosystem, the local water ecosystem. And that's how the various reefs all over are getting destroyed. So I thought, and all the big guns of the world, they were all grappling with this problem. So I thought, let me also put my hat in the ring and see what can be done. And very interestingly enough, I got an opportunity to present this particular solution. The way, all these type of things happen, they are so serendipitous. I was sitting in the anteroom of the deputy director of National Chemicals Lab, who I had gone to consult and figure out what is the thing which can be done with this. And like you have in the barber shops, there you have all sorts of film magazines, but his was a slightly more, the scientific magazine. So I picked up the most non-intimidating of them, which was Nature. And just out of sheer boredom, I opened a page in which a particular creature was featured, which was the snapping shrimp. And it kills its prey by actually using a simple physics principle called cavitation. That intrigued me no ends. I had gone to discuss something else. And suddenly I thought that this is a good thing to discuss with the deputy director. And that's what exactly I did. And he was so shocked that I even knew anything about it, because otherwise I'm a hands-on maintenance engineer. Ships is a maintenance engineer job. So he was very pleased, and he told me what to be done. And we started this company with a partner, and one thing led to the other. We had a solution for this ballast water treatment, which I still believe is a very, very good solution. But somehow it didn't get the right support, and we changed track and got into wastewater treatment and various other things. And then in 2017, hit on the idea of safe water for the borewell hand pumps, because I realized that in India alone there is 30 to 40 crore people who are who don't have safe water, and this number is close to 2 to 3 billion in the world. And if something can be done about it, then you can probably it'll do a lot of good to humanity. So I started working on this and came up with a solution. Very interestingly enough, this was the first time in the world that this particular technology was used for a giving safe water at such a large scale, and it worked. So here I am. It's got all sorts of accolades from all over. I mean, you can say it's a very serendipitous this thing. I come from a very, very academic background. No chance of me becoming an entrepreneur.
So just imagine what would have happened if you picked up India Today instead of Nature or something like that, or The Economist at that time. No, the jokes apart, I think you're right. The Taraltec reactor, has recently, again, my reading shows, has recently been lauded as an engineering masterpiece for social impact by the Duchess Museum, which is the world's largest museum for science and technology. And you've been asked to set up a permanent exhibition at their Nuremberg campus. So what does that mean? You've obviously been you've won multiple awards in India, overseas. You now have a permanent exhibition. What does this mean in terms of being able to take this technology? Even before we go there, what does it mean for you? Is this the recognition that you were looking for when you came up with this concept? Are you satisfied in your journey by the accolades you've won and the recognition that Taraltec has got so far, or is there something ahead of it?
See, like I told before, I was never cut out to be an entrepreneur. It just fell on my lap, and even the technology, you can say, sort of fell on my lap. If you can serve humanity in some way, that is really what I would be looking for. All these things, whatever helps me in getting to that goal is great. I mean, but it's not that I was looking for any of it. I was not. It just fell on my lap again.
Well, serendipity is a word you used. That very well describes it. Just staying on the same plane, Professor Rao, if I can bring you into the discussion. So the fact is, Satana is obviously amongst. Well, in many ways, it's the tip of the spear in terms of the work that is, or the thinking that is being done, and the work that is being done to create human capital that is qualified and focused on solving or strengthening our abilities to deal with these problems in rural India. Could you tell us a bit more, and because I'm not sure if everyone's equally familiar, could you tell us a bit more about the vision and purpose of Satana? And more importantly, equally importantly, what does sustainability mean to you personally?
Okay, let me give it a try. First of all, thanks for this opportunity. I'm really privileged to be among this eminent panel because although the title is CEO Power, I know I'm not CEO, I'm not powerful, but I like to talk and walk, so that's why I'm here. So Sitara basically is a center within IIT Bombay, stands for Center for Technology Alternatives for Rural Areas. So all of us know that IIT Bombay is typically very well known for all the cutting edge research and high-tech research that it is engaged in. And it has produced lots of wonderful people and who have made fame and name across the world and tried to tackle so many issues. So ours is a specific center where we are trying to engage with mostly the unorganized sectors, disadvantaged sections of the society, and try to see whether technology can play any role in tackling the issues that people at large are facing. So the academic program that we have, that is called MTech in Technology and Development. So that is the specialization that we float. It is irrespective of any specific technology. So the idea is to train professionals who can work on the interface between these two domains. One is technology and one is development. So that connects the two is very, very important for us. And that is where we focus on and try to, all the students who join Sitara, they're mostly engineers or science background students. So we try to train these students or first of all, sensitize them to the larger needs of society. So many of them are from urban background and they haven't seen a village or what the problems in the village are like. So that is our first challenge or first step, to bring them closer to the reality, try to make them aware of the grassroots situation. And then that inspires them to pick up one piece of the puzzle and try to tackle it. So that is how we work in small steps. And that is our whole idea, that we would like to contribute in this large space where we are aware that there are lots of puzzling issues. Maybe it is in the field of energy, water, agriculture, food processing, and so many other fields. that many times even we find that the typically technology solutions are available, but still people are not adopting them so easily, or they are not reaching to the people. So what are the barriers? What are the gaps? Whether it is information barrier, whether it is economic barrier, or the technology itself is not developed in consultation with the stakeholders. And many times we find that as a problem, that the elite institutes try to develop technologies in isolation, sitting in their ivory tower. But what we need is developing solutions with the people who are going to use them. So I think that is one of the important ways in which Sitara tries to work. And this is how we try to train our students as well in this domain. So coming to the
before you come in, Professor Rao, I actually remember just leading on from where you stopped. I remember this extremely telling comment from your side when you turned around in one of the videos on Sitara, where you turned around and said, is technology part of the problem or part of the solution? And that actually makes you think. So, no, I completely agree. And, I'm sorry I interrupted you. So you were talking about sustainability.
So in fact, that's also coming from, there were a group of faculty members. So Sitara has been founded in IIT Bombay back in 1985. And there were faculty members across various departments who had this similar urge that we need to work in this space. And Professor Anil Date, who is our founder head of Sitara, he had a very instrumental role in setting up this whole vision and the way Sitara developed over the years. And the subsequent faculty members have added on to that. So coming to this issue of sustainability, everyone, as you mentioned, everyone has a different take or different definition of it. If you say what is God, or so everyone will have their own version. We are having this discussion on the backdrop of Durga Puja or Durgotsav. Similarly, I think although there is some textbook definition that I teach in the course on ecology and environment, that there is a triple bottom line and then there is economic, environmental, and social well-being. But I think that is only for the namesake. But sustainability will mean differently for everybody. When a farmer is facing such a crisis in the field, either there is a crop failure, suddenly there is a hailstorm, or he is under the burden of the loan and so on and so forth. So for him, sustainability is basic issue of survival. So how do you tackle everyday situation and then come out of it? And then you start thinking about what will happen to my next generation, whether I should educate my kids and so on and so forth. So in general, I think sustainability is talking about long-term planning and having that kind of a vision that because it is basically sustaining is to hold on. How far we can see, and that will all depend on where you are in the overall development spectrum. For somebody who is having that survival struggle, whether it is in the urban area or rural area, there are people in that particular bracket everywhere that we find. For them, sustainability means very different. And for us who are the elite people who have all the basic needs fulfilled, and now we can have time to think about what is sustainability, whether we should have protected wildlife areas, whether we should talk about climate crisis and so on and so forth. So our notion of sustainability would be very different in that case. So that is what I will say, that I think thinking about that long-term future, thinking about the welfare of your grandkids or great-grandkids, I think that is where the sustainability comes in. And whether we are able to give them a fair chance of having the same quality of life or even better quality of life that we are enjoying. And how do we ensure that? How do we have a fair share of resource consumption and minimal footprint on this planet? So I think thinking about all these issues is sustainability, especially for those who are in this haves category. So we should think about it in that way. That's what I feel.
No, thank you, Professor Rao. And lots of very interesting thoughts there. And it was interesting as you were talking, especially the last couple of minutes, you were talking about long-term planning, you were talking about protection, you were talking about, preparing for the future or planning for the future. It's almost as if, a lot of what you were saying was prepping for Sarbvir to come in, because, all of those concepts of protection, of planning, of preserving, actually go towards insurance. And, without wanting to be, too tactile about it, or, too facetious about it, actually, I think this is a great opportunity to bring Sarbvir in. Sarbvir is a CEO of Policy Bazaar. Thank you for joining us here today. I think, there is a lot of talk of India being the most the most underinsured major economy in the world. And if you really look at it, there is a significant role that the insurance industry plays globally when it comes to farm insurance, crop insurance, farm equipment insurance. Where are we today along this continuum as far as India is concerned?
Sure. First, thanks for having me on this panel. I feel that compared to what Anjan and Professor Rao have done, and I'm sure what Abhay has done, what we are doing is really small. But I would just like to, just say that, and I will answer your question, but before I get there, I think it's really wonderful that you all have brought the concept of a festival and a, serious discussion together. And of course, in a lighter vein, only the Bengalis could do something like this. But, I think for me, it's become a personal interest to try and figure out, a lot of what our mythology holds for today, right? As in what lessons can be learned. And I won't go there because I think that's not the objective of today's discussion. But I do think there's a lot to learn. And I think modernizing some of these festivals in a positive way versus, just having I guess the same customs, I think is really important. And actually Durga Puja is really fascinating in that sense, because this whole, women's liberation and all that we talk about is not such a new concept. It's been around for a long time. So again, I won't go there. I think coming to the point that you asked in terms of insurance and, what is the challenge, and before we go to crop and, other things, I think there's a very fundamental thing that is important to understand for all of us and to demystify this whole protection gap that you spoke about. What is this gap? This gap is that there are, let's say 300-400 million Indians who are in what we can call middle class, right? At some form of middle class. And I look at it as people who are earning anywhere between 2 lakhs a year to 15, lakhs a year. So that's kind of where we are. Now, for a lot of these people, the biggest challenge, and I'm leaving the very poor out of it because to some extent the government has some schemes and there are some protection available for them, however basic. Now, but the middle class has a very unique problem, which is that if something happens to the chief wage earner, to use a technical term, and or whether it's death or it's like, they fall ill and they have to be in hospital. And that causes, a dramatic decline in the family's standard of living. And this decline can last, 5 years, 10 years, sometimes generations. So that is, to us, that is extremely, worrying. And that is this, if you ask me what Policy Bazaar stands for, just to give you a sense that we are not just in an insurance sales kind of environment. What we really believe in is that this middle class needs to be educated, and we have to teach them that, yes, insurance is the only way that if something bad happens to you, you will have protection. And that, I think, is the essence of what we are all trying to do. So I think the gap in India is just that. It's a gap in education, because it's not really about money. Beyond a point, it's not about money. There are, plans, tools, etc., that you can use to protect yourself, at least to the extent that you need. But there is an education thing, and of course, there are lots of other challenges in terms of complexity of products, etc., etc. So I think the fundamental point that I just want to leave you with is that this gap is very real, as per the estimate. It's like 80% of Indians don't have enough protection, enough coverage. But it's not limited to crop, or it's not an agricultural issue. It's actually an issue which cuts across India. And this is something that, and if we want to have sustainable development, etc., we need these things to be done. And again, I don't hope you don't see this as some kind of marketing message. I'm just saying that it's it's reality, and I'm sure Professor Rao has seen countless examples where this is a real issue which happens, and when something happens to the family, it just destroys the whole thing. And I think that's kind of the point.
I get it, Sarbvir, because in many ways that's also sustainability or ensuring that there is sustainability of income and stability in the family. But just again turning back to the sustainability concept and drawing on your knowledge of insurance around the world, if you look at more developed markets, right? Where does insurance play a part when it comes to such things? If you look at areas around water, around air, around a lot of the and is there a correlation as India develops as an insurance market, as more and more products are introduced into the market, or customized products are created for India? Do you see the insurance industry playing a more central role when it comes to sustainability or the sustainability continuum?
Sure. So I'd just like to make 2 points on that. The first point is that insurance is a long-term business, right? Risks are in the long run, and in fact, it's right. In a way, it's the ultimate business for whom sustainability is super important. So you'll find that in the developed world, especially, the large insurance companies talk a lot about sustainability. They talk a lot about climate change, because climate change is actually one of the biggest risks that the insurance industry faces. And it's very hard, as you know, right? It's all about horizon, right? If for me, if I only care about the next 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, it's fine. But as an industry and as humanity, if we don't look out, because all these dire sounding warnings of so and so country or Maldives will disappear or Bombay will disappear or something, right now can be taken as lighthearted, and we can move on, right? Because it's not affecting us today. But the truth is that when it happens, there is no going back, right? We can't pull Maldives out of the water. So I think the insurance industry is doing a lot actually abroad to talk about these issues, to try to incentivize. See, finally, human beings are a function of incentives, sadly. So you have to incentivize people to say, okay, if your behavior is better, then things will we will give you X or Y. And I think that is a huge deal, and that's something that the industry is very, very focused on, especially abroad. I think the second point, which I'd just like to make is, and I think you made a very good point, that we have to now in India, go beyond aping the West in some ways, right? And I would argue that we have. I mean, if you see big change in the last, I would say 5-10 years, is that we are going, beyond that, and there's a bunch of stuff that one can talk about. Now, it's very important to understand that some problems are Indian problems. They are not, developed world problems at all. And this middle class issue is also that one, because if you live in Europe, for instance, there's no problem. The state takes care of you, or if you live in Australia, or to some extent even in the US, right? While people complain a lot about it, but the truth is it's not so bad. So this is a unique Indian problem. So we have to come up with unique Indian solutions and, focus on doing things. And it may be interesting for you to know that actually, even in the US, for instance, despite it being a very developed market, protection or term insurance is actually not that popular, as one would expect, right? If it was just about education and development, then it should be very popular. But again, other incentives include. So I think it's very important for us as society, and I always say society, not government, not industry. As a society, we have to explain and go in that right direction, because Indian problems will be solved by Indians and with our solutions. Because unfortunately, as no one else ever comes to solve your problems, right?
No, thank you, Sarbvir. So final question to you for the moment is, so to you personally, what does sustainability mean, therefore?
See, I think sustainability, the way I look at it, is inclusive development, right? Which is that things are done in a manner that it's not just for the benefit of a few, but of benefit of the many. And when I think about it, and before today's discussion, I must admit, I spent some time trying to, see what does it really mean to me? Is there any genuine answer I can give you versus, a canned answer? I think that what I realized was that it's all about horizons, right? It's about your ability to look, what horizon are you looking at? And I think if you look at a long enough horizon, then of course you will do only those things which are sustainable, because that is then in your interest as well. So I think think what is sustainability is reasonably, I would say at least one can smell it and say, okay, yes, this is sustainable or this is not. But I think the biggest challenge is to make sure that the horizons are long enough that we all can care about it. And I think it's a leadership issue, because beyond a point, only if people drive this point, this thing, will it happen. Because otherwise there's actually no reason to really worry about what, our great grandchildren will go through. I mean, however much we may say about it.
Interesting. Very, very, very interesting. Thank you, Sarbvir. Abhay, just if I can bring you in on and draw from what Sarbvir was saying and draw you into a discussion that's around time horizon, right? And given the fact that you've spent a significant part of your career being a global banker that's worked on large energy mandates, if you think about it from a time horizon point of view, how have global governments, industries, consumers, sort of embraced the concept of green or sustainable energy versus fossil fuels?
Thanks, and it's an honor to be on this panel. I think, Sukanti, in the hope of being provocative to get this conversation going, I would say that the sustainability movement has not been fully adopted by governments, industries, or consumers. And I'll say that partly because most revolutions and social movements have not come from these three sources. Where they've come from, and I think this is a good forum to talk about this, is actually from civil society. From basically the combination of, in this particular circumstance, except for a few Northern European governments that have been involved, governments really don't care. They think about their current constituencies and helping them in the near term, even if that occurs at the expense of what Sarbvir and Professor Rao talked about, which is future generations. And future generations don't vote in near-term elections. They don't have a voice. And notwithstanding that occasionally I think about my grandchildren or their children, they don't really come into the picture in near term. And I think that in reality, consumers like green in concept, but aren't willing to pay a premium for it. Governments don't care, and industry cares the least, because if governments don't force them and consumers don't buy their goods, they're least important. And so where I think, civil society, journalists, academics, those are the three groups that have really started and pushed the climate change movement from basically being nothing to really being important. And I think that they were the first dominoes, and it's the activism and pressure, if you will, of civil society groups that has really gotten this movement going. And I think only now, and I would say now, to the extent that governments and industry is interested, it's not the end of that movement. It's not even the beginning of the end. It's not even the end of the beginning. It's sort of, they've just begun to realize that there's a war afoot on this. And I think that we're really in the early stages. But I think that this is really something that has been stoked, as most freedom movements and social change, by community activists, nonprofit groups, and civil society groups, as well as academics, I would say.
Fascinating, Abhay. And you have set the cat amongst the pigeons. So I'm going to lead off. I'm tempted to lead off on something that you shared, but right away. But I'm going to hold back for a moment with great difficulty. But ask you about your version, your view of sustainability. So, what is sustainability to your mind before I follow your lead and set the cat amongst the pigeons?
Well, I'll be brief, because actually Professor Rao and Sarbvir also touched on this. There is a huge time, and you pointed to it, Sukanti, there is a huge conflict between preserving resources and the environment for generations that are 100, 200 years from now, who we don't know about, we don't care about, they don't vote, they don't have economic power, and they don't have a voice. And I think Anjan talked about focusing on groups that don't have a voice, and the PBWA also talked about focusing on those groups. And this is the group that has the least voice. At least women, children who are currently alive have a role. I think really focusing on and sustainability in its extreme really focuses on sustaining resources at the expense of today's groups for future groups, which is a very difficult thing to do because all the powers of the world are arrayed against those future groups because they don't vote, they don't spend, and they don't pay taxes, and they don't work at businesses. And so I think that it's very hard to get people to focus on something so abstract, so far in the future, especially when it occurs at the expense of current rupees and current income and current welfare, which is actually very important as well. I mean, especially for less privileged and underdeveloped groups. And so I think that that's at the nub of it, in my mind, and getting businesses who are really focused on dollars and cents from the United States perspective, or rupees and paisa, to focus on it is even harder. And I think that's one element of the challenge that I think everybody talked about.
Thanks, thank you, Abhay. And just to lead off there, and I'll break format, and I'd love everyone's views on this. So sustainability, whose problem is it? And I'd welcome thoughts from the panel. Is it government? Is it the people themselves? Is it corporations?
I'll throw this out. It's
urban versus rural. Go ahead.
I think, look, it is a moral problem, right? It is an ethical problem. And so the question is, who is responsible for ethical, moral, human problems, especially when they run across borders? And I think the question is, maybe the first cut answer would be the government, because the government's responsibility is to address and preserve the strength of the country and the nation. But governments answer to voters, and voters are worried about their bread and butter issues today. And so I think what you're talking with the silence on the phone probably speaks to the fact that it's very hard to identify who's responsible. But I have some interesting thoughts on who's becoming responsible, but we can I'd open it to the crowd, to the panel.
So colleagues on the panel?
Sorry, just say something on this. I think it's a marketing problem. It may seem a very strange thing to say, but I think what Abhay has been very eloquently saying, I think it's a marketing problem. See, it's nobody's problem. The only way it can ever become a real problem and be something that we have to focus on is finally people are made aware of the fact that this is going to be a big issue and it's going to impact, your generations. And I think that is why, if you see in certain parts of the world, it is considered, people take it far more seriously. And in certain parts of the world, people don't take it as seriously, because in those places, they have been able to, I guess they've reached a point where their basic, issues are relatively well handled, and they're able to start thinking about future issues. But I think if you want to make sustainability a big deal in India, for instance, I think you will have to do some kind of huge awareness, and, there will have to be some form of driving home this point to the common person that there is something that is going to change, because otherwise, it's never going to be an issue. Frankly speaking, we are just reaching the point where basic infrastructure is an issue in India, right? In our elections. Finally, in some states at least, it's very clear now that you have to have roads, and people are talking about electricity and water and versus, the earlier history. So I think that is the only way these things change. And whether it comes because of, civil society and in these things, finally, only those people will take the lead for whom money is not the issue. See, because it's never going to be a money-making racket. You're not going to become rich by talking about sustainability. Although today you could argue you can, but it's not really a money-making racket. It's actually a issue where somebody with very high moral values and, having that fiber to keep talking about something, against the grain for a long time, will then at some point, I'm sure it'll break through and, people will start talking about it. Doing something about it. So I do feel that finally is the essence of everything starts from really this awareness and creating that awareness, which is the issue right now.
Anjan, Professor Rao.
Yeah, please stop saying Professor Rao, because I feel very odd. Singled out.
So Anand it is.
Yes, thank you so much. So I feel, yes, this is a very interesting question, that who should be concerned about sustainability. And I think obviously those who are at the receiving end, those who are the most vulnerable sections. It is their issue in some sense. And then, as Abhay was mentioning, those future generations, they don't count because of various reasons, because they don't have votes or whatever. But there is a larger, issue here, that we are just talking about people here, but that is the very anthropocentric view. And then there are forests, there is wildlife, there are so many other compartments in the ecosystem. And then they are voiceless in some sense. So when we are talking about sustainability, all these other entities, they don't have any voice, they don't have any opinion, who is going to ask them anything about it. So, and all of them are vulnerable in some sense. So I think sustainability is an issue of all those. And that's why at least those people who try to empathize with these sections of the environment, I think they become the crusaders, they become the champions for this cause, and then they take this movement further, I think. So that is kind of a picture that we see here today.
So let me be provocative on that, and they say geniuses are essentially recognized overseas, and and then recognized at home. It happened to Galileo. It's happened to Anjan. So I'm intentionally being provocative, and my apologies for that. But the fact is, obviously, you've created this fabulous. Do we call you an inventor? I've always wondered about that. But but the fact is, you've brought technology to the fore. You've actually created a significantly different technology that promises to change the entire access to water problem. Have you got the kind of support? If government is responsible, if society is responsible, if it's a problem that our colleagues said, have you got the kind of support to socialize and commercialize your technology?
Let me put it in a slightly different way. If you expect any government anywhere to foresee new technology and support it in a very formal and structured way, I don't think it will happen, because no one knows how to support them. That is number one. At the same time, what is really needed, and which is there aplenty in India, is absolutely gems who are manning the system. So when you go and touch a good person, he will lead you to a solution, whether there is a structure or not, which is very, very important. So I would think that expecting the structure to carry you is really asking for too much, because you cannot envisage what is going to happen tomorrow. And that's where I'm coming from. And it's not a question of someone recognizing you abroad or someone recognizing you here. I mean, obviously, I have not landed up abroad with the meager resources which I had. So obviously, it was in India that I got recognized first. And it is always the case like that. They pick it up from you. It is never that they picked up and they told India, now here is someone. It's never like that. You have to be picked up from the local, from the ground level.
Terrific. That's very interesting. And in terms of Taraltec and how has it been accepted? How is it being across the country, across are you seeing the kind of acceptance that you'd like, or the adoption that you'd like? Because I think Anand also talked about something that was very interesting. He talked about barriers to adoption, and he referenced the fact that at times a lot of these developments happened in isolation and not in consultation with stakeholders, or in trying to understand the needs of stakeholders, and that causes a barrier to entry. So what are your thoughts in that space? And Anand, I love your views as well. If you look at a lot of these social innovations or sustainable innovations that we're talking about, how important is that bit that you talked about? There is stakeholder consultation, trying to take the views of people, who are actually struggling with these problems on the ground, into your solution. according to developing a solution.
Who are you asking this to? Me?
To you first, Anand, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And then to Anand.
Okay. I don't know whether Professor Rao, or as he prefers to call him, I should call him Anand, whether he's aware that Dr. Agnihotri, who works in Sitara, he has played an instrumental role in what I'm doing today. So has Professor Sukhatme, who was the director, and he is sort of my mentor in this. So, and I was brought up in IIT Bombay in the campus. So IIT Bombay in that sense has played a very, very seminal role in whatever I am doing. And sorry, I did. What is the second thing you asked me?
So what is, how important is it to immerse yourself in society, to work with stakeholders, understand the problem in terms of, you know, and in how is that an easier approach to stakeholder adoption of a technology like the one that you brought to the fore? Yeah, in fact, most of the time it is connecting various functions, various domains together, which results in something like what I have done. Like if you had asked me 6 years back what happens in a village, I wouldn't have had any idea what is required there, or you know, what they may need. But when I saw a problem live, I realized that, you know, this can be a solution for that, and that set me thinking that this is a good thing for the people there. And typically it is like that. I mean, you never know what will get you know, applied to what, but you should be sensitive enough to see what can be done, and if you have seen a problem, then how best you can try to solve it. And that's what exactly happened, at least in my case. I saw the problem and I realized that you know, something like this can be, probably this technology can be used for that. Anand, any thoughts in that area?
Yeah, I think maybe there are different varieties of problems and categories of problems. For some kind of a problem that Anjan is saying, probably this kind of a thinking and then the solution may emerge without large scale consultation with the stakeholders. But there are different types of problems where the daily engagement of stakeholders is very, very important. And in those cases, I think whether it is a design of a cook stove, for example, this is a very widely researched problem in India, for example, this wooden cook stove, where we burn the biomass and there is a lot of smoke and there are issues related to all kinds of issues related to health and so on and so forth. And then we are trying to tackle this for a long time. The government has initiated so many different initiatives to improve the design of the cook stove, and then we have fantastic designs that are available also in the labs. But then the barrier comes, people are not adopting those, or they are not liking those because it is part of their cultural habit in terms of what kind of a stove they want, what kind of cooking practice they have, and so on. So unless they give their inputs in terms of what is acceptable and not acceptable to them, this kind of a solution on a large scale may not work. So there are, I think, a differentiation in terms of what type of technologies that we're talking about and what type of solutions, whether there are large number of individual stakeholders who are involved, then these kind of a consultation is required, whereas some other type of technologies may not be that relevant.
Got it. So, Abhay, just moving quickly to you. So you were starting to talk about accountability, right? And you were starting to talk about, you know, accountability of the boardrooms. We hear more and more companies talking about, you know, their adherence to the SDGs. We're seeing more and more companies turning around and talking about, you know, carbon capture, net, you know, moving towards net zero. Who is it, you know, who is it, you know, in the ESG paradigm, who is it that will hold these companies accountable, you know, if they do not adhere to what they've set out to do? Who are the guardians?
So, you know, in physics, there's a concept of dark matter and dark energy that accounts for 70% or up to 95%, depending on how you think about it, of all the energy and matter in the universe, except it is hard to detect, it is hard to understand. And so applying this to our situation, I believe that there is this dark matter. It's not government, it's not even industry, that drives a lot of adoption of some of the technologies that Anjan and Anand was talking about, that response. And I think that, I actually think that the big driver for ESG and sustainability are the people who, at some level, have the longest timeframes that they're thinking about. And I know this will come as counterintuitive, but it's actually institutional investors. And I know that sounds ridiculous on its face, but just hold your disbelief in suspension for a moment. In 1950, big inventions, and I'm talking pension funds, university endowments, sovereign wealth funds, insurance companies who invest large volumes of money professionally, they accounted in 1950 for about less than 10% of the global stock market. Most of it was wealthy individuals, promoters, founders. Right now, as it sits, at the very least, that number is 80%. So 80% of all the money that gets invested, which in aggregate is bigger than much of the money deployed by governments, is actually owned and operated by professional investors who come in every day and invest capital. And ironically, especially as it pertains to things like the adoption of new technologies, investing in venture and technology businesses, investing in sustainability solutions, holding industrial companies, mining companies, oil companies to task, more and more, it's actually been this group. And I'm just as surprised as anybody, because my job has been to sit in the middle of the flow of money from investors to companies. And I think that at some level, this group has become has changed its direction from thinking just about maximizing share price and shareholder value, which I think was the almost the religion of the 1980s, to now taking into account impact in a lot of what they do. And they actually, arguably, as much as government, have power in influencing business action. And I think that, and they're actually also very sensitive to the pressures and advocacy of civil society. And I think that, so one of the people who's been missing, because they don't talk a lot except through pushing, in the boardroom level, are institutional investors. LIC in the insurance space, the large pension funds in India and abroad, the sovereign wealth funds of Singapore, Japan, and the Middle East own more of the equity of all the Indian companies and global companies than anybody recognizes. And they're the ones basically saying, we want to see what you're doing. And they're the ones who are asking for concepts like, when are you going to be net zero? What are you doing in terms of treatment of underprivileged groups, including employees, but also local community? And I think that they're the ones that they don't draw a lot of attention to themselves, but I think that they're the ones that we need to figure out how to incentivize to do more. I'll stop there in case, and I'd welcome anybody disagreeing, but or agreeing.
So Sarbvir, let me bring you in to begin with. You've been a former venture capitalist for many years of your life. So the fact is, did you look at green or adherence to green when you were wearing that cap in the past? Was that a key consideration when you were investing in companies? When you look at it today, if you look at green technologies, if you think about your peers in the venture capital world, we'd love your thoughts in terms of, what Abhay shared. And you also talked about a marketing campaign, the need for a greater marketing campaign around sustainability. So whose responsibility is it, to think about that marketing campaign, or to to bring about that marketing campaign? So 2 questions, but feel free to answer either or both. And then I'd love, in terms of the marketing campaign bit, I'd love everyone else's thoughts on it. But so green, the power of green.
So I think Sukanti, and just I would like to talk about what Abhay just said. I think if you just peel one layer back, right? Why are institutional investors and I'm going to leave some of these countries that he chose are not necessarily, I would agree with, some of those countries don't really care about sustainability as much. But his larger point is right, that it is finally being driven by the fact that large pools of capital are asking for this, right? Now, I have 2 points on that. One is, why are they asking for it, right? They are asking for it because in some cases, their constituents are driving this point. So it is the people. See, finally, a sovereign fund owns the money. The money belongs to the citizens of the country, right? So if Norway's sovereign fund, which is one of the largest in the world, decides to say that I care about ESG and I'm not going to invest in tobacco, that is a big deal. And the reason for that is because the Norwegians have said that we don't want our sovereign fund to invest in tobacco. So I think we do have to go back. Finally, yes, it is institutional investors, and I think it's great that they're doing it. But unfortunately, I feel that leads to tokenism rather than a solution to the problem. And what is happening is now that you'll find you can just look at the presentations of many large corporates, and you'll be surprised to find that the last 5 slides are about the ESG framework that this company has and how they are carbon neutral. And for crying out loud, you sell insurance. Like, what is carbon neutral about you? Right. So I think it's not even, so again, I welcome the fact that they're doing it. And I also like the fact that it's happening because of pressure from society and not because of, frankly speaking, I am very skeptical of 5 people sitting in a dark wood paneled room and ruling the world, right? Just that whole concept just doesn't appeal to me. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but it doesn't appeal to me. So I'm just saying that finally it comes down from the citizens, and it is that society which has to care for it. Now, the second part of your question, when I was a venture capitalist in India, right, the reason if I were to be very honest with you, I didn't care about green at all. And the reason I didn't care about green at all was because in India right now, green doesn't matter, right? So we've seen organic. So we saw many business plans of people selling organic vegetables and claiming that we're going to help the farmers and all that stuff. But the truth is that it costs almost 3 to 4 times. If you really want a real organic, what is called pure organic, not touched by chemicals and all that, it costs 3-4x. No one is willing to pay 3-4x. So, even my wife, I'll tell you, she bought organic vegetables. Yes, very important for our family once. And then the second time she said, no, this whole thing is too expensive. So what I'm saying is that right now in India, green doesn't work. But let's take Germany, right? Or a Scandinavian country. Their green works. Green rocks over there. And that's why you'll find people investing. And somebody like Vinod Khosla, who's made tremendous amounts of money in various other fields, today is a huge proponent of this whole thing. Because, yes, it's because I'm sure he has some moral reasons also. But it's largely also because he can see that, it's going to make money for him. So just tying it back to the marketing point, the point I was just trying to make was that finally, it has to come through the grassroots, the people who are affected by it. And only when they rise up, right, that leads to all kinds of consequences. And, everybody else at some level, see, the world largely is a democratic place, I believe, in the long run. And so what happens is that, these things matter.
So Anjan, Sarbvir made a very interesting point in terms of, it requires the people to rise up. It requires the people to voice themselves. If you look at the constituents you serve, the people that Taraltec tries to reach out to, provide basic amenities to, how should their voices be harnessed? And if you look at the interrelationship between access to water or sustainable resources and economic development, is there a tie there? Is there some kind of a correlation there that we all should be aware of?
One thing I can tell you straight out is for the whole world, COVID was a disaster. And in a very strange way, we are a beneficiary of COVID, because I don't have to tell anybody about microbes and virus anymore, and they all want safe water. And so in that sense, it's a huge positive which has happened. And it is actually, you can make out that at the grassroots level, they are asking for clean water. And that itself is so huge, because before, no one even bothered about it. In fact, people were happily drinking bottled water and saying, what's the need of microbe-killed water? So I used to ask them, how come you're drinking bottled water? So, now that has at least stopped. And so I believe, when the people who are actually wanting the safe water comes from the grassroots level, it has to get picked up. There's no choice.
So there's an inevitability about it. Anand, the futurologists believe that, the next set of global upheavals will happen around scarce natural resources like water, right? Again, looking at it from a clean energy, green energy, bioenergy point of view, how important is the entire work, the entire movement towards green from your perspective? How do we bridge the gap between the bit that Sarbvir talked about, clean, organic is expensive, versus, something that is functional, is supplemental, is critical to inclusive growth and inclusive development?
I think it's a tough question. Basically, we are all individual, and typically we claim ourselves economically rational decision makers. And what we are deciding is depends on priorities that we have set and the constraints that we are facing. So that's why this awareness and education is very important thing in terms of making people aware that what they are consuming today is going to shape their future. So I think this whole apathy for organic or people are not aware of, or they are not caring about it, is mainly because of the issues related to this. So, and then, it's on one hand, we are trying to encourage farmers to go organic, trying to minimize the use of chemicals, and but then how do we ensure that they get a fair price for their produce? So that is a big question. And whatever we are saying today, all the kinds of chaos in terms of pricing of agriculture commodities, this is one more different direction in which the whole issue will be taken. So, but yes, it will be all individuals, as Sarbvir said. Mass movement is required in terms of people demanding certain solutions, and then they also accepting that this is their priority and this is what they want. Then only probably this will be tackled.
Great. Let's bring in a couple of members of the audience, if that's okay. I think we've actually given our colleagues on the in the audience quite a lot to think about. It'll be great to hear if they've got questions of you. So I'm going to recede into the background for a couple of minutes and let them take over. So colleagues in the audience, if you
so I can go first.
Perfect.
I can
go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you. And it was really wonderful. My wife is on the other line, hearing this out, and she's an economics student, and all of this coming together very well. Maybe there's a question if she wants to ask, but let me go with mine. We talked about the direction in which the world is moving. There is some discussion we've had on technology and innovation. We talked about how some of the policies the government is opening up. We talked about how we need to change our behaviors. Abhay, you talked about it very, very briefly. In this entire landscape of all the various pieces, there is the government, there's the corporate, there is non-government organizations like ourselves. And we certainly have a part to play. are we typically labeled as an organization which is, either, getting together, a bunch of people for celebrations, or are we largely focused on, for poverty alleviation and, urban, rural development, if you will? So, I mean, in your mind, could you help us how an association like ourselves, as, Powai Bengali Welfare Association, where there's a huge, bent for us to be able to work on a better, work and for a better society, what's the role you think the society association like ourselves play?
Who's the question directed to?
I'd love to hear, the views from everybody if the time permits. But, Anjan Babu, if you want to kind of, give it a shot.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, the way you all can really play a role is sensitizing the children, because they have got the best way to influence the people in the house. And this is not going to happen overnight. But if they are sensitized, small things like, you see a tap which is leaking, to repair it, small things which can be done by them, and they, start doing all those things, I think, we have a future in safe hands.
Yeah, I mean, I think I absolutely agree. Charity begins at home, and our next generation needs to be conscious. I mean, that's the family and the individual piece of it. Or maybe Professor Rao, we're talking about an association like a welfare association. How does that fit in the ecosystem of drivers of change as we talk about ESG?
I think the civil society organizations or NGOs, they have a very critical role to play in both in terms of the organizing people or creating awareness, as well as implementing certain solutions. We find that government is working at its own level, and there are schemes, programs of various kinds. And there is a big gap between those who are able to access those and those large number of people who are either unaware or the benefit is not reaching to them. So I think the civil society organization can try to bridge that gap. And many times we find that the government programs are so rigid. I mean, their financial structure is so rigid. Their rules are so rigid. So that may not benefit certain people. But if the CSOs have some flexible funds, I think that can enable, that can make wonders in terms of bridging this gap. So they definitely have a big role to play.
Thank you. I have another question, Sukanti, which I'll keep on reserve.
Yes, please.
Do shout. Give me a shout.
Thank you. I saw Debraj raise his hand. So Debraj, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I can come in. I am unable to start my video, so the audio's got to suffice for it.
Up to you. Whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah, I don't think we're able to start the video out here, so that's fine. My question is to Professor Rao. I think as a millennial myself and a professional who's around about getting to his mid-career stage, for people like us, I think I want to know, is there something that we can do, given the kind of insane workloads that we have, and honestly the kind of mindset that we kind of get into? We're always chasing profits, revenues, and everything as part of our organizations. Is there something that we can do on a personal capacity on such kind of issues, which are really very sensitive, and I think a lot of us do feel about it, but it's just that in the overall scheme of things we don't kind of give it that much of an action. So is it just the pure calling from the heart, or is there something else that we can participate very meaningfully to contribute on such topics? A part question to that also is that would education kind of play a role in giving a very early level of awareness, and maybe in a certain way enforcing certain prefixed hours of work on areas related to sustainability and social work, that courses in your schools, colleges, and some levels of higher education can also start coming in to help this overall cause. I don't know if I've kind of combined a couple of things together in these questions.
Okay. Yes, I believe that every individual matters, and then whatever decisions we are making, even in the daily life, our choices about our lifestyle. Every decision matters, and then there is no need to elaborate. But ultimately, whatever issues we are talking about, whether it is global sustainability or whether it is the environmental issues in your vicinity or in your neighborhood, everything is shaped up by the individual action. So I think there is a scope for as an individual to contribute in this matter, whether you do it, you join some similar minded people to form a group, and then that will have some more impact. But even as an individual, if you start thinking in this direction and even do small bits, people are, watching you, they are following, they may start following you, they may start appreciating you. So I think there is a merit in doing whatever your heart says that this is going to be good for the environment. And then in terms of the education, yes, definitely, as it was mentioned earlier also. So currently the kids or the children, they are the best ambassadors in terms of how we can groom them, and then they can take up this cause in future, because they are ultimately the best stakeholders, because we are dealing with their future when we are talking about sustainability. And then one positive thing I feel that the changes that have been brought in the education field, maybe it is in terms of the new education policy, or even now what we find that the children are having this subject of environmental science. The way it is being conveyed and taught, I think that will help in a long run to have them being more conscious about these issues and more activity-based education. So, for example, all of us who are living in the surroundings of Powai, the Powai lake is a very important asset for us. So what happens to the health of this lake, how it is degrading over the years, and what are the solutions being proposed? So just the simple awareness about these issues and what kind of actions we can take as a community, as a civil society organization, that is very, very important, I feel. And then the children are watching us. So I'm, in fact, I stay on campus. So I'm very conscious in terms of how my students are watching what I'm doing. My son, he's watching me. What do I do? What I preach, and do I follow the same thing? So that is very important. So I think we have to be, we have a lot of responsibility in that sense.
Thank you, Anand. Colleagues, otherwise, please raise your hands or come off mute. Shantanu, you had another question. Would you like to ask that?
Can I ask one?
Of course, sure, Abhay, go ahead.
Here, I think Abhay was talking about the investors, institutional investors, and Sarbvir was talking about marketing. I feel that a lot of corporates are also, as per the government rules, they were supposed to spend 2% of their profit in the social sector. That's a huge money coming in from the corporates as well. So whether willingly or unwillingly, they are also supporting this cause. And that is where I feel that NGO like us can play a role. And obviously, the institutional investors and all, they can ask those boardroom questions to the corporations. But then corporates also, they can see to it that how it is getting implemented on the ground. So this is a key takeaway for me. It's a wonderful thing that you are saying. I have a question, but I do not know whether the time permits for this. Sukanti, do you have 2 minutes or 5 minutes?
Sure, we've got 2 minutes, and then we'll take one more question and then wrap up. So,
yeah. So I was before I was just thinking that while we are seeing that huge climate change is impacting all of us, and the government is one of the key stakeholders in this. Abhay was saying that the government is not, because the people do not vote, but then the people who vote are also suffering because of the climate actions. So this is where I feel that what is government stake, because government doesn't have enough fund. At the same time, the involvement of the people on the grassroots levels are important. That is where I feel that whether marketing is the only thing, because we have seen that if the political top bosses, if they can market things well, because we have seen in vaccination, we have seen in Swachh Bharat, and some of the things are being marketed well, but implementation maybe somewhere it is not that up to the mark. But then if we can market it well, whether there is a chance of arresting this kind of a climate changes in future. My question is to Abhay as well as next to Anand.
Anand, do you want to go or you want me to take a stab? So I think, sort of your point around how, one, you talked about how a social service organization like yours can be involved. And I do think actually that you're right, that a lot of companies, even though they commit to having a certain percentage for ESG and social welfare, don't know where to put it to have the greatest effect. And I think that to some extent, a organization and nonprofits play a central role in actually being the vehicle for deployment of some of that money. So that I think is absolutely the case. And I think that that is a critical role. I also think the second critical role speaks to something that Devraj asked about, which is what can individuals who have day jobs and are busy getting their kids to do homework, what can they do to have this impact without quitting everything and going and becoming activists? And I think that the second role that a social services and a social welfare organization can play is that movements, and I read a book about revolutions recently, and what they said is revolutions aren't caused by 100% of the population being motivated. It's actually caused by 2% of the population being motivated and 98% of the population generally supporting that 2%. And I think that the role of your and other civil society organizations really can play as being that 2% around, which can raise the awareness, which Sarbvir talked about, for certain critical issues that gets that momentum going and brings the rest of the broader population along and with their support. And I think that those two are underappreciated, and I think certainly merit a lot more attention. And I think that's a compliment to the role that that PBWA is playing.
Terrific. We've got time for one final question from the audience. Shantanu, if you'd like to come back, if other colleagues are, going once, going twice. Shantanu, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. This Abhay, this is a question for you, and I don't want to sound, over the top. Me being a banker like yourself, I couldn't resist myself from asking this question. Look, Abhay, we've arrived in the space of green bonds or ESG risks in banking or ESG value, ESG and valuation techniques. When do you think, by when do you think future-ready ESG-aligned companies will start getting better market valuations?
So if I had the answer to that, Shantanu, I'd be in a much better economic situation. But I think that one of the things that you're seeing is that there's been some research coming out that says that to some extent, the people who do genuinely, not tokenism, as Sarbvir talked about, who genuinely commit to improving their stance on ESG, do perform well, but they perform well in a particular way. And this is very important. They don't necessarily in any given year have better stock price performance or things like that. But they tend to have fewer disasters. And so there's a famous adage by one of Warren Buffett, who's a famous US investor, where he says, success in life is not being at the top 10% of everything you do, but avoiding the bottom half. And I think similarly, where companies do perform better because of ESG is they avoid the catastrophic downsides that come with massive environmental failures, that come with massive social failures, and things like that. And I think, or governance failures. And I think that that's something that intuitively is not what people think about when they think about success, but it really constitutes better performance. And I think that you're beginning, and so there's a little bit of evidence coming, partly because it's hard to measure. Right now, there's no transparency around what people are really doing versus the tokenism that Sarbvir talked about. There's no measurability. but people are forcing, certainly in Western accounting standards and disclosures, and even, you know, SEBI and government organizations. So I think that as that improves, I think you'll see it. And I think, but we're seeing the green shoots of that now. But I would say 10 years from now, I would hope that you'd see a lot more accountability. And I think the merits of that will become much clearer. And I'm hoping that'll also get the ball moving and snowball effect taking into a place. But I don't know if Anand or Sarbvir or Anjan, you have any views.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Abhay. Even the various regulators across the world. I mean, largely the Fed is actually asking, banking companies to define their future scenarios based on their lending portfolio to ESG, aligned companies. That's one part of how the companies are behaving. I'd like to understand whether the investors are also going to be looking at and choosing, say, this is the stock I want to invest in. And because it's US friendly, ESG friendly, this is the company for the future. But you mostly addressed some of what I was already asking.
So Shantanu, there was this very interesting discussion yesterday because one of the global super majors in terms of energy actually committed. The chairman committed, Chevron committed $10 billion, in this space. And the fact is that their share prices actually came down. And there was a very interesting comment about, if society, if investors do not recognize and incentivize companies that are, carbon, we're talking about energy, traditional hydrocarbon focused energy companies trying to look at clean energy, then why should they be incentivized to do anything at all? Then they might as well just disregard everything and just continue with whatever they're doing.
Certainly.
And plus, there's this entire spectrum around greenwashing, which Abhay touched upon, because ultimately, how do you really know that the companies that say they are doing things are actually doing things? Who are the guardians? Who's going to go in and investigate and ensure that they are doing what they claim they do?
Thank you. Thank you.
Bengali address, we shoot over time, right? And once you get talking, you get, a group of Bengalis, and sorry, you've all been inducted into the Bengali hemisphere, of course, Anjan's naturally, part of the hemisphere, we have to get into this intellectual dialogue. The Adda is something we cannot do without. But thank you very much for joining us, on this journey today. But I'm not going to let you go so quickly. I'd like everyone to just come in for 2 seconds and share any final thoughts you've got in terms of the subject, in terms of, your counsel to each one of us, in terms of, and Anjan, I think you hit the nail on the head when you turned around and said, even if we make our children aware of a dripping tap, that's a step in the right direction. So if you think about the continuum, what final thoughts, what advice, what counsel, what guidance would you give our viewers, our members, when they think about their roles in the sustainability continuum? Anjan, starting with you.
I would think whenever any new thing happens, like say something like what we've done, keep an open mind. That is very crucial. You cannot be solving tomorrow's problems with yesterday's mindset.
Terrific. Sarbvir?
I'd just like to echo that, sustainability begins at home. I think someone said it, and I think that's absolutely the right thing. It's finally, we all have to change our habits, and, if we change 5 people around us, I think that will obviously lead to great outcomes. And I think the idea of keeping an open mind is very, very important because we don't have solutions. So I think we should also remember that we don't have all the solutions. So, staying open to new ideas and trying them is obviously very important.
Terrific. Anand?
Say we need to pause and think about the way we live life and then reflect on it. And then this COVID situation, I think, has been a kind of an opportunity in disguise. So we are now aware that we can live without doing many things. like there would be a section of society who would believe that without flying, how can we survive? So I think we are in this era that now this situation has made us realize that there are many unimportant things, or they can be postponed, or they can be avoided altogether. So I think we need to list out what we consume, how much we consume, what we own, what we aspire, and think about whether it is going to help us in long term, and that will help us to be on the right path, whatever sustainability we are seeking.
Thank you, Anand. Abhay?
So I'll tie together a couple of other things. I think that one of the things I would ask people to think about is that there's a deep underinvestment in technology solutions for the bottom of the economic pyramid. And I think that generally technology starts for the wealthy, serving the wealthy, and works its way down. And I think both Anjan and the work Anand is doing, and in fact Sarbvir's business as well, is geared towards addressing the middle class. And I think that we're in the early stages of a huge technological revolution in investing in those technologies whose wealth creating potential has been underappreciated. And I would ask, people to think about that.
Thank you, Abhay. So just to wrap up, I think, a couple of points from my side. There were lots and lots of golden nuggets, from all of you. So sustainability is obviously everybody's problem. And while sustainability appears to be a calling from the heart to begin with, there's no doubt that there's an economic imperative associated with it. And, there is merit in starting. Sustainability starts at home. So, the little steps that we need to look at in our own backyards and within our families to make a step forward. That being said, I think, what was very telling was the need for greater awareness, the need for greater sensitization, the need for a marketing program, a global marketing program in this area is fascinating. And the fact that maybe institutional investors are the future guardians of the galaxy. So that really makes you think. And I think most of all of us need to do what we're doing, and social welfare organizations like PBWA are taking a great step forward, because ultimately this is not only something we're doing for ourselves, but we're doing for our children and for their future. So on that note, I'd like to thank all of you and hand this back to Saurabh. It's been a pleasure and a privilege. Happy Puja to all of you, and happy Navratri to all of you from my side. Saurabh, back to you.
Sukanti, wonderful. Thank you very much. All the panelists, fantastic discussion. When we are talking of environment sustainability, it's very difficult to talk about it, such a huge subject, within 1 hour or 75 minutes. But I think we have done justice. During the Durgotsav, we try to create this kind of an awareness. That is what is our contributions coming here. So not only we do on the field, on the ground level interventions, even for creating awareness around us, that is very important. Each one of you, again, Anjan, Abhay, Sarbvir, Anand, and last is Sukanti. Thank you so very much, and from Powai Bengali Welfare Association. Namaskar.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.